Justin, Boone, and I are continuing to preview week 3. And your next question here, Boone, is a big one because it's pretty much like the theme of week 3.
Well, and I will admit that I saw you wrote an article on this topic, and I thought, you know what would be easy? If I make this one of the questions and I can put my feet up and I can let Harmon just answer them all, right? So this one is, are we buying or selling all these backup quarterbacks who could potentially start? Some of them we know they're going to start. Some of them we're not quite sure yet, but we can list them off. I mean, Mac Jones is going up against the Cardinals, Marcus Mariota against the Raiders, Jake Browning at the Vikings. The other side of that game, Carson Wentz versus the Bengals, the old Jake Browning, Carson Wentz game. Gotta love that. And then Tyrod Taylor against the Bucks. Now, again, you wrote the article, Harmon. You're going to do the heavy lifting on this one. So let's go through them. I mean, Mac Jones to me, and I'm going to bring them up in the order that I have them ranked for week 3. Mac Jones to me last week was the QB9 overall. He throws for 279 yards and 3 touchdowns. That wasn't all him. That's certainly a lot on the weapons around him that make life easy and that Shanahan system. I think this is the player. If you're looking at all these guys and he ends up starting, I think he's the one that could have a really big week here against the Cardinals.
Interesting. There's definitely somebody that I think I like better if you're picking a quarterback off the waiver wire. We'll get to him.
I like the tease.
But yeah, Mac Jones. Yeah, Mac Jones played well. He's also the one that I feel like has the most likely odds to not start, just because Purdy was participating on Wednesday. Kyle Shanahan left the door open for Purdy basically to play this week. So I think Purdy's got a shot to get back out there. Jones is the one I think most likely to get, rug pulled. If you're relying on him, then you're kind of scrambling on Sunday. But I agree that he did play well. 53.8% of his pass attempts went for 10 plus yards on Sunday. Obviously the one touchdown was just a big catch and run by Juwan Jennings, where I was like, this guy's out there running a 4.8 and like nobody's near him. Where is everybody? But I mean, I think they're using McCaffrey in these really fun ways as like a true real deal slot receiver. Ricky Pearsall's running vertical routes. Juwan Jennings is just like a steady Eddie guy in this offense. So yeah, like I think Jones, we saw it last week. He's not Brock Purdy. He can't create like Brock Purdy, in chaos, which is why Purdy lifts the ceiling of this unit. But we can get right back to the Kyle Shanahan 49ers quarterback, just color in between the lines and like, don't mess it up, stupid. Like that type of quarterback. And I think Jones showed last week he can absolutely do that.
Yeah, and whether it's Jones or Purdy, the Cardinals are super banged up in their secondary right now. Will Johnson, Max Melton. We'll see if they're limited or if they're able to play this week. Looks like they could be shorthanded back there, and that would only make this matchup that much easier. So I was factoring that in as well. We'll see if Purdy can get out there. But to me, if Purdy's not out there, Mac Jones is a solid quarterback too. Pretty good streamer. Next up, I wonder if this is the guy that you're looking at. Marcus Mariota versus the Raiders. And again, with this one, we don't know for sure that Jaden Daniels is going to miss this game, but he hasn't practiced yet this week. We'll see if he can get out there on Friday. I really think like this is headed towards Daniels missing a game with the knee injury. And I'll just hand it over to you before I say anything about Marcus Mariota, who I'm also kind of high on. What's your take on Marcus Mariota? And is he that guy who you like the most out of this group?
Yes, he is. By the way, for the JJ McCarthy conspiracy theorists, that like, oh, this is not a real injury, which by the way, I don't buy into. I think he really is injured, but like, if people that are calling it like a soft benching, this is why, because like the Commanders are giving Jaden Daniels every possible, like we're going to wait to the last minute to declare him out. The Vikings like, McCarthy's out. Like he's out. He's not going to play. He's not going to play this week. We're going to go ahead and start Carson Wentz like right away. They said that. So for the McCarthy conspiracy theorists, that's why they believe that. But I'm with you. I do think that Marcus Mariota is probably starting on Sunday against the Raiders. So good matchup. And again, putting this article together, I think it was funny that we've had like a big sample of these guys like playing for their teams recently. Not a big sample, but like something to look back on. And for Marcus Mariota, he was obnoxiously efficient in this offense last year. He had 2 games where he threw double-digit pass attempts. Week 7 against the Panthers and Week 18 against the Dallas Cowboys. Marcus Mariota in those games averaged 10.1 adjusted yards per attempt, a 60% completion rate. Again, obviously small sample, but that would rank second in the league so far this year, behind only the great Daniel Jones and ahead of Brock Purdy at 56%. So that's how good he was. And also, he ran last year as well, over 90 rushing yards in those two games, combined 45.6 fantasy points in those games. And he also got the ball to Terry McLaurin too, who obviously needs some help. I know we're going to talk McLaurin later, but he threw to McLaurin on 29.5% of his pass attempts for a cool 13 targets, 12 catches, 152 yards, and a score. So like, I do think that Mariota, if he gets in there, I kind of put him up as like a top 15 quarterback, and I think I might be being conservative. I think he actually might be closer to a top 12 quarterback if he starts.
Nice. And yeah, I mean, based on the results last year, he was the QB9 and the QB6 in those two games that you brought up. So he definitely has that high end ceiling there, top 10 ceiling. So I like that call. And I think I have him as QB17, and I think I have Mac Jones as QB16. So they're pretty close together. We'll see how that shakes out. Jake Browning against the Vikings. Let's talk about Jake Browning and Carson Wentz here. I'm curious what you have to say about this one, because I think we both agree that Browning could be decent, like rest of season, filling in for Burrow for however long he's out. I know people were saying they were mad that I didn't leave Joe Burrow in my trade column and that I didn't have him in the trade value chart at the very bottom, but it was like, is he going to be back? I mean, they need to stay in the playoff hunt. I don't think he's going to be back this season. That's why I completely removed him. But over the long haul, Browning, I think, is going to be okay and keep this offense moving. I think the concern is he going to be able to do that over the next few weeks when they have some very, very tough matchups, starting with this Vikings defense?
Yeah. People won't forget that obviously the last time he played the Vikings, that was a really fun game. But of course, that was pre-Brian Flores. But he did get his revenge on. He had the clip where he said, "You shouldn't have effing cut me," like right into the camera, slamming his helmet down. So we'll see if Browning's still that juiced up to give it to the Vikings again. But that was a very different defensive ecosystem. But this is a little bit of a different Bengals offense as well. We talked about this in depth on the earlier show on the People's Panic Meter podcast this week, and pointed out that like the way they use Jamar Chase now is a lot more conducive to like getting layup targets. So I think again, if people really want the in-depth breakdown of the Browning stuff, they can go back and listen to that episode. Go check it out, obviously, here on YouTube. Subscribe. By the way, if you're watching us on YouTube right now and you're not subscribed, like, you might as well just put the dagger right into my heart. Like, what are we doing here? Come on. So subscribe to the channel. Go check out that People's Panic Meter episode for the full Browning breakdown. We've got a lot of stuff there. But, yeah, I mean, he was good on the under center stuff. He's really good on play action. I think they'll push the right buttons to keep the floor afloat for him and all these skill position players too. But it is certainly a difficult matchup. If I had T. Higgins this week, I would be feeling pretty nervous if I had T. Higgins, because they do all that zone stuff. Is he going to be pushing the ball downfield? But if I had Jamar Chase, I'd still be viewing him as like a top 10 receiver rest of season. Do you think that's too aggressive?
No, I agree. I think just volume-wise,
okay,
of course, talent-wise, but I think he'll get plenty of volume. That's how it's gone, and Browning's been out there. He's just peppered him with targets, and I don't think that's going to change. I do worry about this next little stretch, though. It's not just the Vikings, right? It's Broncos, Lions, and Packers the 3 weeks after that. So it's going to be tough. And yeah, I don't know that you're going to want to start Browning in this game potentially. If some of these other options are out there, I would probably go with them for this one. But I think rest of the season, Browning is going to be pretty good. On the other side of that game, Carson Wentz, I mean, he hasn't done much fantasy-wise in a while. And yet all the things that I've said about Kevin O'Connell and this Vikings offense, they still stand to be true, right? Like, he's had Nick Mullins out there. He's had Josh Dobbs out there. He revived the career of Sam Darnold, made all those guys top 15 fantasy quarterbacks for however long they were starting in this offense. Could Wentz be the next one on that list?
I'll tell you what, Boone, I had a kind of a weird good time this morning putting together the Carson Wentz section of this backup quarterback article. You can tell, by the way, because it's the longest section of the piece, that I had fun. And it was for two reasons. One, it was the Carson Wentz part of it, which we'll get to here in a second. But two, we often say, well, it can't get much worse, right? And usually that's like what people say right before it gets a lot worse. I will say, I think the stats are, a little bit unfair here. And like, McCarthy hasn't just been like a complete joke out there, but statistically it really can't get much worse for the Vikings offense right now. Minnesota, McCarthy's 38.6% success rate ranks 33rd out of 34 quarterbacks to take 20-plus dropbacks so far this season. His EPA per dropback is 34th. He has the highest sack rate at 18%. The Vikings have averaged 2 minutes and 11 time of possession per drive on the season, which ranks dead last, and they've run 47.5 plays per game, which ranks dead last. So it actually can't really get much worse for your Vikings skill position players than what we've seen through the first 2 weeks. That's not all McCarthy's fault, and we should kind of squint at some of the parts of this ecosystem. The pass catchers beyond Jefferson. Jefferson has dropped footballs this year. He actually has a 15.4% drop rate, and also just the offensive line injuries as well. That's a big part of it. That being said, you mentioned the production they've gotten from veteran quarterbacks, and Carson Wentz, by the way, this stat from Bill Barnwell is insane that I saw. I linked to this in the article. I don't know if you've seen this either. Carson Wentz, if he starts, which he's going to start this weekend, he would become the first quarterback in NFL history to start at least one game for 6 different teams in 6 consecutive seasons. Eagles in 2020, Colts 2021, Commanders 2022, Rams 2023, Chiefs 2024, and Vikings 2025. And that Rams 2023 start, which probably is the one that everybody forgot, but also is the one that if you're trying to cope with your Vikings skill position players, well, he was actually really good in that game. He's been pretty much terrible the last 3 years, but he was actually pretty good in that game with a bunch of backups, and there's some system familiarity here with Carson Wentz and the Rams and Kevin O'Connell because they come from the same language. So I don't know. Again, I guess the selling point here for Wentz and these skill position players is it really can't get too much worse than it's been so far.
Fair enough. I got one more I want to ask you about too, and that's Tyrod Taylor, who I think I should move up potentially. I almost think I like him more than Carson Wentz. I don't know about you, but at least even at 36, he brings a little rushing ability out there. They have, a very concentrated offense, but they have these high-end talents and Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. The matchup with the Bucs, we know you can throw on the Bucs. They're tough against the run, but you can throw on them. I mean, last week he had over 8 fantasy points. He didn't even play 40% of the game, so he was on his way to putting up a usable fantasy day if he was out there for the whole game. And you look at what he's done in the past, right? At least 17 fantasy points in 3 of the 4 games where he played at least 90% of the snaps back in 2023. How's that for a stat for you? A lot of things going on in there, but yeah, he is a guy who can put up decent fantasy stats. He's not going to win you your week, but because of the rushing ability, veteran savvy, he can come through for you. Any interest in this one, Harmon?
Listen, if for whatever reason you're listening to the show, you're watching the show, and you've followed my entire career dating back to the NFL fantasy days, I'm a long time Tyrod Taylor guy. I love Tyrod. And the fact that writing this article today, I realized he's 36 years old made me feel ancient. I'm a longtime Tyrod truther, so I'm definitely willing to be excited about watching Tyrod in this, what I still think is a well-constructed Jets offense. He's also when he's gotten on the field, he's thrown 33 passes over the last 2 years with the Jets, and he's targeted Garrett Wilson on 27.3% of those. He's gotten in there and he's known the assignment. You remember against your Bills last year when they got blown out? The Jets got blown out. It was 40-0. Tyrod comes on the field after reports early in the morning that Garrett Wilson was kind of starting to get sick of the Aaron Rodgers thing, and just immediately 3 targets to Garrett Wilson, including a fade route for a touchdown. I kind of think that's what's going to happen here. So I really do think he can give you a nice floor performance as a fantasy quarterback. And I don't know, especially with how bad Justin Fields was last week. If I was planning to start Garrett Wilson, the fact that it's Tyrod under center, Boone, I don't think that really changes my expectations. I think he can keep the ship afloat here.
Yeah, it might not be quite as good as the Justin Fields experience, but he can give you a relative version of it. And yeah, I think the offense will continue moving. And it helps that he doesn't have to keep a ton of guys afloat. There's really only 2 players that we're using for fantasy. So as long as he can make sure that they get going. And for Breece Hall this week, because of that tough run defense, he might have to do a little bit in the passing game to elevate those fantasy numbers. But yeah, I think Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall are going to be fine in this one, even with Tyrod Taylor out there.
Brother, you say he can't be the full Justin Fields experience or whatever. I mean, I watched the Justin Fields experience last week, and we're 3 weeks in, and it's already been a roller coaster for Fields. He was like QB2 on the week in week 1. Then he set a record for the worst completion percentage over expectation in the next gen stats era in week 2, and now he's in concussion protocol. Like, it has been the full Justin Fields whiplash experience. But all right, let's pick up the pace here a little bit. Let's hit your last 2 questions, which are a little bit of buy and sell sort of theme here.
Yeah, so we went, buy and sell with those backup quarterbacks. Now let's talk a little buy and sell in terms of fantasy assets out there. And I mentioned the trade value charts earlier. In those trade value charts, every week for each position, I put a player that I'm buying, sometimes more, and a player that I'm selling. So it ends up being at least 8 guys in there who I'm buying and selling for the week. I want to talk about some of them. I'm throwing a few other names in here as well, but let's talk them through. I'll go by position as well. And we can just hit it hard with the Jets. Justin Fields and Brock Purdy are 2 guys that, based on the injuries they had, their managers might have looked elsewhere for other options. When it comes to Fields, they might be disappointed after that game against the Bills. I would buy into both of these situations. We talked about Purdy earlier and what he can bring. We know how good he can be for fantasy, a back-end QB1 for fantasy each of the last 2 seasons. The schedule is still great. The guys are getting healthy around him. We'll get George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk back eventually. Purdy's a great option. And even though Fields had that tough game last week, I think he is still going to have more usable fantasy weeks than not. So I really like both those guys. I will say Breece Hall is a buy as well here because another guy coming off a bad week, but it's the same logic, right? Like the same logic that we're looking at with Fields. You have that down week. If people are questioning, after 2 games, okay, one was great, one wasn't, what player is he? Try to get in there right now and go get him. The schedule for the Jets is so easy the rest of the way. For Fields, 3rd easiest among quarterbacks. For Hall, 3rd easiest among running backs. And you could look ahead to later in the season too, and you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself on trying to figure out fantasy playoff schedules, but the Jets have one of the easiest fantasy playoff schedules out there. So Hall is somebody that I would look to, and he's currently handling over 60% of the snaps in that backfield. We thought this was going to be a committee. He's going pretty much unchallenged as the lead guy. So another player who is a great fantasy asset, I think still underrated at the moment. Terry McLaurin, we're buying low. We're talking about these buy lows. Terry McLaurin, maybe the ultimate buy low. And you know why? Because last year he didn't have the holdout. He did the exact same thing, right? Like last season had 2 bad games.
True.
And then after that, put up 90 yards and or a touchdown in 8 straight contests. So I would not be surprised at all if the light switches on at some point here. He gets up to speed. He's back in game shape. And boom, we start getting some more of the Terry McLaurin games that we were used to last season. And then a buy high. Too many buy lows. Let's go with a buy high. And I mentioned all his stats before. I brought them up in that opening section. Let's talk about him again. Tyler Warren on the Colts. I don't know that everyone realizes just how good he can be for fantasy. And one of the reasons for it, and this is something to look at when you're trying to identify players to buy early in the season, he hasn't scored any touchdowns yet. So that's just, he's the tight end 4 overall. He's doing great at a position where there's not a lot of guys getting the kind of volume he's getting, but he hasn't had like those elite week winning kind of performances yet. So try to go out and get him while you still can. And if you have to pay up to do it, you do it, because this guy could legitimately finish as the tight end 1 overall this season, especially with our guy Tucker Kraft hurt now. So that might be another name out of the mix there. But Brock Bowers a little bit banged up. I still think he'll finish ahead of him. Trey McBride not scoring touchdowns yet. I still think he'll finish ahead of him. But Warren right in that mix with those guys based on the kind of volume that he's getting. So I think all those names are great buys right now.
You're definitely making me think about like some of these teams where I have Tucker Kraft, but like I'm deep at wide receiver, like maybe offering a wide receiver too, and seeing if I can get, a Tyler Warren type. Maybe, I don't know. We'll figure that out. But I like all those suggestions. I'll just say for Terry McLaurin, like if you're going to trade for him, you got to expect some level of volatility because Debo is getting those like easy touches, and McLaurin was already like a vertical guy. But that actually transitions as well to the players that you're selling this week, because one of them is a Washington Commanders play. Actually, 2 of them are Washington Commanders.
Yeah, so Jared Goff is one and Jaden Daniels is the other when we're talking about quarterbacks here. The Goff one I won't get into again. We've talked about him plenty, all the splits. When you're coming off a game where he's throwing 5 touchdowns, that's not going to happen again, at least not for a while. Jaden Daniels, though, with this injury, with a knee injury, I'm a little concerned he's going to miss this game. I'm a little concerned that he's not necessarily going to be the same player for a little while. This is a guy that we're looking to as a potential dual threat rushing quarterback. And remember last season, he had that rib injury. And for a month or so in the middle of last season, he was not the same quarterback. He wasn't running as much. The fantasy stats were way down. Really somebody that you didn't want in your lineup. And then he got healthy and finished very strong. So if you're willing to ride this next little stretch out, that's fine. But if you want to move him right now and capitalize on that name before his value goes down a little bit over the next few games, next few weeks, next month or so, I would do it because he is still someone that people love for fantasy. And again, a situation where I don't think people are factoring in that a dual threat quarterback with a knee injury might not be as effective on the ground. So he is certainly one. J.K. Dobbins, I hate this one because I don't like to try to predict injuries. And yet J.K. Dobbins is the one guy that every season of his career has gotten hurt. He looks great right now. He looks like a supreme fantasy value. He's the lead back in Denver, but will he be able to hold up over the long haul? I just think the injury is inevitable for him. And we have RJ Harvey there, who Sean Payton continues to talk up, who is going to get more work as the season goes along here. And I think when that Dobbins injury happens, that's when Harvey's going to take over. So you see a couple good performances from Dobbins early in the season. I think you want to cash in on that before that injury occurs. T. Higgins, oh man, this one is so unfortunate. Could be a top 12 fantasy guy. And yet now with the Burrow injury, I don't think he's going to become anything like that. I think he's more of a volatile wide receiver 3 for fantasy. So try to get out on that one. I think everybody's going to realize that though. So you're not going to get top value, but still I would probably move off him and try to get something else. And then Travis Kelce and Zach Ertz as the last two options here, the guys that I think you should be selling. It's just moving off of old tight ends. These guys, they've had great careers. They've put up decent numbers in the first 2 weeks. Are they going to be able to continue this? Travis Kelce's turned 36 during the season. Zach Ertz is turning 35 during the season. Zach Ertz found the end zone in back-to-back weeks. That double-digit per week fantasy production is not going to continue for him, especially if we have Jaden Daniels out of the mix for a game or so. So Ertz is definitely somebody that you want to move. And Kelce, you're capitalizing on the name value before Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy and all these other options come back. So I'm moving off of those two if you can.